Thank you so much for taking time to be here today and to engage with us about climate action in Delaware. My name is Susan Love, and I am the administrator of the Climate and Sustainability section in the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. Can we get the slide deck up? We're rolling, but I'm going to keep moving ahead and the slides will catch up with me. So I will be joined today by DNREC Secretary Sean Garvin, along with Carrie Hewitt and Ann Steedley from our consulting team. In addition to a number of really dedicated staff and consultants who are behind the scenes today, making sure that this virtual workshop runs without a hitch, and who will be helping to facilitate discussions later on. Before we get started, I want to make sure that you know how to negotiate this Zoom webinar. I know we've all been learning a lot about webinars. You will be on mute when you first join us. To test incoming sound, click the up arrow on the microphone button at the bottom of your screen. And we should have that up here shortly. I'm still seeing the, there we go. There's your microphone button there. To test incoming sound, click the up arrow on the microphone button at the bottom of your screen. Select test speaker and microphone. If your computer or mobile device audio doesn't work, either try relaunching Zoom or switch to phone audio. Second, and very importantly, make sure you can find the chat button and go ahead and hit that button. You can request technical support from the meeting host. And our hosts are Teresa Townsend and Prahalad there. You can send them a private message to get some assistance if you're having some trouble. You can also ask the Climate Plan team questions, and we'll be doing much more of that in breakout sessions. We may not be able to get to all of your questions during the workshop. However, we will be capturing all questions from the chat box and including a Q&A section to the workshop summary report. Closed captioning is also available, and this will be the next slide, if you would like to use it. To turn on captions, just click the closed caption icon at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see that icon, click the more icon. You might need to expand your screen a little bit. Later on, we will use breakout rooms. If you want to utilize closed captioning in the breakout groups, send a message to the host. We will make sure you are on the breakout session where closed captioning is available. If you need help, you can always use that chat button for assistance. So I want to make sure the slides are catching up. We're still having a little bit of technical issues there with the slides. So I'm going to continue moving on and hope that the slides will catch up with me as I move on. But again, if you do want to use closed captioning, please go ahead and find that button. Now that we are all mostly having our Zoom working, I want to go ahead and get started. And I'm hoping that the slides will catch up with me soon. And it's still on the looping slides, not the slide deck. So today's workshop is going to focus on opportunities for Delaware to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. We will talk about potential actions we are considering for the Climate Action Plan, understand which types of actions have the greatest potential to reduce emissions, and then engage in exercises about prioritizing actions. For the first half hour or so, we will do an overview presentation. This will be then followed up by breakout groups, and then we'll have a brief wrap up and some polling questions for everyone. Do we have Secretary Garvin on the line yet? We do. I heard it. I think I saw an affirmative. So at this time, I would like to introduce DNREC Secretary Sean Garvin, formerly the EPA Region 3 Administrator prior to joining the DNREC team. Secretary Garvin is no stranger to working for actions that help prepare us for climate change. I'm hoping the slide deck is going to catch up, but I do want to keep moving ahead. So Secretary Garvin, if you would like to go ahead and do our opening remarks. This is your time. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It kept saying that the host was not letting me unmute, which I found somewhat interesting. So I am now unmuted. Appreciate it, Susan. Thank you very much. On behalf of Governor Carney and me, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this virtual public workshop on Delaware's Climate Action Plan. Hold on a second. It's always encouraging to see so many people at events like these. It confirms for me that our residents care about the future of our state, and even though Delaware is small, we have a lot of big ideas to share and contribute. Climate change is and will continue to be a very important issue for Delaware. We have already seen how climate change is affecting our state. The decade from 2010 to 2019 was Delaware's hottest in recorded history. We also just experienced Delaware's hottest July in recorded history. Moreover, the number of days each year that are above 95 degrees Fahrenheit could double from an average of 5 days per year to over 10 days per year by 2040. Delaware has also seen sea level rise over 1 foot in Lewis since the 1900s, and sea levels could rise nearly 2 feet above 1900 levels by 2050. These are very serious issues. More frequent and severe storms bring heavy rains and flooding, and they are projected to increase. It is because of these serious issues that we are engaging residents to help put together Delaware's Climate Action Plan. At our last round of public workshops in March, we had over 250 people provide input to the Climate Action Plan. We also had hundreds of people provide ideas on the plan through our online survey. Through all these opportunities, residents submitted over 850 ideas for how to take action on climate change. This is a very clear indicator of the commitment you all have to our state. The goal of today's workshop is to focus on solutions to minimize greenhouse gas emissions in Delaware. We are looking forward to hearing all your ideas to help inform the Climate Action Plan. Next week, we'll focus on adaptation and resiliency in 3 additional workshops. As you can see from the slide on the screen, climate change is not just an environmental issue. By taking action on climate change, we are working to protect the many things we value in Delaware: our public health, economy, environment, the natural places we enjoy for recreation, our infrastructure, and access to clean energy and transportation for all Delawareans. So thank you again for taking time out of your very busy schedules to participate in this very important conversation. Back to you, Susan.
I was having trouble unmuting, and I know there are people on this call who wish they had a mute button permanently for me, but luckily I've unmuted now and ready to move on. Thank you, Secretary, for those remarks. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy day to be with us for a little bit, and I really appreciate your leadership and support on these efforts. So before I jump into more of my presentation, we're going to do a quick poll with everyone here to see who is with us today and then what brought you here. So a poll should be popping up here in just 1 second. It's like magic. So the first question is to get to know who is joining us today and where you live. So if you would please take a moment and click the button which county you live in. Do you live in Kent County, Newcastle County, Sussex County? Not in Delaware, but you work here in Delaware, or you neither live or work in Delaware, but you love Delaware, so you're here today with us. And we'll give that a couple minutes. Not a couple minutes, a couple seconds. And hopefully that will be popping up here in a second. And there we go. Oh, it looks like the majority of us are from Newcastle County. And we have several people who don't live or work in Delaware, but love it regardless and are here. So we have a good mix of folks today. That is great. So we're going to move on to question number 2, which is, Did you participate with us in the first round of workshops that we had in March, or take the online survey that was available in March? So we're looking to see whether we have new folks who are engaging for the first time in the climate plan, or folks who are coming back to continue the dialogue. So the possible responses are: I attended a workshop and completed the online survey way back in March. I only attended a workshop. I only completed the online survey. I wasn't able to do either, or I didn't know about the climate action plan until just now, and here I am. So we'll do a couple seconds to get everybody's input on that, and then we will see our results. And then we'll follow up with only one more question here about what your primary interest in Delaware's climate action plan is. But there we go. Oh, good. So we have quite a number of you who were able to join us in March and who have come back to provide more input and learn more. And this is great. We also have people who weren't able to participate in March, but are now able to participate. And we've got people who may have just found out about our efforts recently, and you're here. So that's wonderful. So I think we'll have enough context for you today, for those of you who weren't here in March, so that you can really get an idea of what we're doing and help us craft our plan. So the third question is, what is your primary interest in Delaware's climate action plan? I'm concerned about climate change and want to support state plans to address it. Or I am curious to learn more about climate change and state plans to address it. Or I'm on the fence about climate change, but I'm looking for more information. Or I don't think climate change is an issue, but I want to know what the state is proposing. And the last one, I like to engage on many civic issues. Climate change just happens to be one of them. So go ahead and submit your answers. And we'll take a second to find out our results. I love the final question. I love going to webinars about lots of issues. And I'm sure some of you here have been on lots of webinars this summer. All right, our answer should be popping up here any moment. There we go. Wow, almost 80% of you are concerned about climate change and want to support state plans to address it. That actually tracks pretty well with our statewide climate change survey, which shows that nearly 80% of folks in the state believe that climate change is an issue and want to move forward on actions. So we've got curiosity. Oh, I didn't even get through that. So this is great. And then we've got a couple, a smaller group who likes to engage on every issue, and some folks who aren't really sure that climate change is an important issue, but do want to track what the state is proposing. So this is great. Okay, so we're going to keep moving on in the interest of time. So I just want to remind you one more time, in case you weren't with us early in the webinar, that if you need closed captioning, you should message the host in the chat box at this point, Teresa or Prahaland, because we want to make sure that we split you into the group that will have the closed captioner. So if you need that closed captioning, just basically raise your hand in the chat box over there, and we'll make sure that captioning is available for you as we move forward. Okay, so here we go, the presentation. Some of you may be wondering why we need to take action on climate change now. We know that human activities, primarily the burning of fossil fuels, cause the global climate changes that we see today. There's broad consensus that in order to avoid the most catastrophic of climate change impacts, everyone across the globe must significantly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to near zero. We know that there is not one answer or one easy path to accomplish this goal. And we know that any path forward demands a comprehensive, strategic, and equitable response. Next slide. Many countries, 16 US states, and hundreds of local governments have adopted targets to reduce emissions by at least 80% by 2050. And Delaware currently has a short-term target to reduce emissions by 26 to 28% by the year 2025. And we're going to be spending a lot of time today talking about that. Delaware's Climate Action Plan will outline a path to reach the 2025 goal and to set the state up for further emission reductions beyond 2025. The plan builds on a foundation of decades of state actions that help to achieve this goal, including renewable energy and energy efficiency commitments. But wait, that's not all. Delaware's Climate Action Plan will also outline a path to becoming more resilient and prepared for the impacts of climate change, increased temperatures, hotter, longer summers, sea level rise, and heavy precipitation. Workshops next week will cover these topics, as Secretary Garvin mentioned. So if you're interested, please, there's still time to sign up. But today we're really going to hone in on the greenhouse gas emissions. Delaware's Climate Action Plan will be released this winter. This workshop is part of the second round of public engagement. The first occurred in March. Since March, our staff have been working to review public feedback, talk with technical experts, and conduct greenhouse gas emissions modeling, which is the focus of the rest of our discussion today. So today I'm going to share with you what we heard from you during our round of workshops and through our online survey, and then what we learned this summer from modeling various climate mitigation strategies. After reviewing all of this information, and hang tight, there's a lot, but it's really interesting, we're going to ask you questions in breakout rooms about which actions should be prioritized based upon their effectiveness and benefits. So first, I just want to review what we heard during our first round of public workshops. More than 250 of you participated across 3 counties. We received 870 comments for action. And you wanted to see more renewable energy and more energy efficient buildings, more public transit, more electric vehicle options, and more protection from flooding. We also heard repeatedly that equity and accessibility are important, as well as concerns about the costs of these actions to households and businesses. We used all of that input, coupled with expert consultations, to select a suite of actions to investigate further that would reduce emissions. We looked at what our emissions are today as compared to 2005, and looked at what they would be in the future with no new actions to reduce those emissions. Then we looked at a suite of 20 options to see how implementing those strategies would affect emissions. What we learned is that without any new emission reduction actions, Delaware will be just shy of its goal of reducing emissions by at least 26% by 2025. We also learned that without additional emission actions, emissions would start rising again around 2032. This is due to population growth and economic activity. But when we looked at the suite of potential actions, we found that Delaware could exceed its 2025 goal and put in place significant emission reductions beyond 2025, while also benefiting from lots of co-benefits. So I'm going to show you 2 graphs in a second, but I want to share with you the high-level takeaways that these graphs are going to highlight. 1, decarbonizing the electricity grid, meaning making electricity cleaner from non-carbon sources, has the greatest emission reduction potential in the long term. Energy efficiency actions are very effective in the short term to help meet our short-term goal and remain an important strategy longer term. Also longer term, electrification of transportation and buildings is an important strategy. And what I mean here by building electrification is that buildings would rely on electricity, clean electricity, for heat and cooking rather than propane, oil, and natural gas. Okay, so here come the graphs. Now don't get scared. There's a lot of information in this graph and I'm going to go over it. This graph shows emissions from 2005 through 2050 if no additional actions are taken to reduce emissions. Actual emissions are shown to 2017. So this is what we have actual data for. And then projected emissions are beyond that. And that's because we don't have all of the data for the years 2018 and 2019. So the projections start in after 2017. That vertical black line shows where that projection split begins. So each year on this graph is represented by 1 bar. The higher the bar, the more emissions in that given year. And then each bar, as you can see, has a variety of colors. These colors represent the contribution of different economic sectors. So from this one graph, you can see both overall emissions plus the contribution of each sector. And by each sector, I mean industrial processes, transportation, electric power generation. So what this graph shows us, and these results show, that our state greenhouse gas emissions will reduce by 25.4% by 2025 from a 2005 baseline year. So we're just shy of meeting that 26% goal. And then the trend of decreasing greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 to 2025 results from existing state and federal policies, like our renewable power goals and federal tailpipe emission standards, coupled with regional energy trends, primarily due to a shift in producing electricity with natural gas instead of coal. It also shows that emissions will rise after about 2032, meaning that by 2050, Delaware's emissions would have fallen by 19.6% from 2005 levels overall. It is important to look many decades out because, as I discussed earlier, worldwide emissions must be near zero by mid-century to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. This shows us that additional action is needed both in the short term to meet our 26% by 2025 goal, and in the long term to bring emissions closer to zero by 2050. So I want to point out to you the red, blue, and yellow part of this graph. These represent the industrial sector, the transportation sector, and electric power generation. These three sectors account for over 90% of total emissions and represent the largest opportunities for emission reductions. So now I'm going to show you emissions with these additional actions that we looked at. And there we go. You can see that the graph looks much different. With the actions that we've modeled, if we implement those, emissions would come down over time. Results of the analysis indicate that if all of these actions we selected to model were fully implemented, Delaware's net greenhouse gas emissions would decline by 31.2% by 2025 from 2005 levels. This would definitely exceed our 2025 emission reduction goal. In addition, full implementation of these actions could achieve further reductions beyond 2025. Implementing these actions would result in nearly 60% reduction by 2050. So, what are these actions that you're talking about, Susan? So I'm going to share with you more information about what these actions are and how they reduce emissions. There's a lot of information on this slide, and again, I'm going to walk you through it. So we modeled 20 strategies. Time and resources meant that we had to make choices about what we could look at in a modeling exercise. Although these 20 strategies represent some of the most well-known actions to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, there are certainly other actions the state could take that could result in even greater reductions. It is very important to note that not every strategy that we modeled will necessarily be selected for incorporation as an action in our climate action plan. In addition, we know that there are important actions that must be taken that don't lend themselves well to modeling. So the climate action plan itself will contain a mix of strategies that were modeled and some that we don't have modeling data for. So the information from this modeling exercise is meant to inform the choices that we make in Delaware's climate action plan. Most of the 20 strategies that we modeled can be grouped into several categories: renewable energy, zero emission vehicles, building energy efficiency, fuel and roadway efficiency, building electrification, and waste diversion and reduction. We also modeled actions for methane and industrial chemicals that we won't discuss today just due to time constraints, but these actions also have significant reduction potential. As you can see here, renewable energy, zero emission vehicles like electric or hydrogen, and energy efficiency reduced the most emissions between 2005 and 2050. The reduction potential is measured in terms of metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. I know this is a mouthful, but this is just so we can compare actions across different greenhouse gas types equally. So they're all measured in sort of the same unit. Each strategy, of course, varies in their cost to implement and how quickly they can be fully implemented. And another important thing to note is that many of these strategies have significant co-benefits of improving air quality, creating new job opportunities, saving residents and businesses money, improving the resilience of our power supply, and improving mobility options across our state. So at this point, I'm going to dig in to each one of these categories just for a second to give you a flavor of what we looked at. So for renewable energy, increasing the amount of renewable energy that runs our electricity grid has the greatest potential to reduce emissions in the long term, with 4.3 million metric tons of reduction between 2005 and 2050. This includes actions like increasing solar and geothermal on homes and businesses, and phasing out burning fossil fuels for utility scale electric generation. Co-benefits include improved air quality, job creation, and energy resilience. Next category, converting our cars, trucks, and buses to zero emissions has the second largest emission reduction potential in that time period, with 1.2 million metric tons of reduction between 2005 and 2050. This includes converting to both electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. This strategy also assumes that we increase the fueling infrastructure for those vehicles. Co-benefits include improved air quality, cost savings, and even job creation. Using less energy in our homes, offices, and manufacturing centers through a variety of energy efficiency measures can save over 700,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2050. Because the measures can be put in place relatively quickly, it could be an important strategy for short-term emission reductions and meeting that 2025 goal. But these benefits go much longer than that. Co-benefits include cost savings, job creation, energy resilience, and air quality improvements. If we are piquing your interest, I will remind you that the full report of all of these measures is available on our website, declimateplan.org. Just a couple more I'd like to highlight for you. Hang in there with me. So making our existing transportation system more efficient, making it easier to walk and bike, increasing the efficiency of gasoline-powered cars plays an important role in reducing emissions, with 650 thousand tons of emissions reduction potential. Sorry for that. I know this is a lot of numbers. These measures can save money, help improve air quality, and help provide transportation choices. Rounding the curve here, building electrification can help reduce up to 550,000 tons of carbon emissions. As pointed out before, this measure looks at powering appliances like stoves and furnaces with renewable power. This would include electrifying new buildings and retrofitting existing buildings over time. Benefits include job creation, air quality, and energy resilience. And finally, the way that we manage waste products also plays a role, although smaller than the other strategies we discussed. Reducing, reusing, recycling, and composting can reduce up to about 200,000 tons of emissions with opportunities for job creation and cost savings. Phew! Thanks for hanging in there as I reviewed the results of the emissions modeling that we conducted to help inform the actions we choose to focus in on the Climate Action Plan. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Steedley, our consultant from Planning Communities, who is going to move us to the next and much more interesting part of our agenda, where we actually get to hear from you. Ann?
All right, just getting unmuted there. Thanks, Susan. Next, we'll actually be breaking this great crowd up into smaller groups, as Susan mentioned, to participate in an exercise or a series of questions. This exercise will help you learn more about the greenhouse gas reduction potential of the different climate action measures being considered that Susan just covered. It'll allow you to consider the co-benefits of the measures and provide your input on how the measures should be prioritized by the state. You'll be automatically assigned to a breakout room, no need for action on your part yet. The online meeting host will then transport you into a separate room with a small group. Each group will have a facilitator to guide you through the exercise, and you'll have a chat box there as well. All participants will then be brought back to the full group at the end of this exercise for discussion and the final part of today's public meeting.
Welcome back, everybody. We hope you had fun engaging in a little interactive exercise to understand a little bit more about the benefits of each of these reduction strategies, as well as what the various rankings are in terms of which ones are the most have the most potential for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we want to just take a moment here to give everybody an opportunity. I'm going to ask each of our facilitators to just report back a couple key takeaways from each of your breakout sessions, which co-benefits seem to rise up amongst folks. So I know in our group, there was definitely a great understanding of the co-benefits of improved health, as well as improved natural resource protection among several of our strategies, particularly those around transportation. So those were a couple key takeaways for my group in particular. But maybe I'll ask each of our facilitators to share what their group discussed. And not to pick on anybody in particular, but Sonia, I'm going to go to you next because I thought of you first.
Well, thanks. So my group was terrific, but we had a technical glitch, so we did it a little bit differently. They didn't get to see everything that we wanted them to. But nevertheless, the benefits that they saw were very heavily in the health area, in healthier natural resources, which were important to them, preserving natural resources and healthier natural resources, biodiversity retention in the long run, and better air and soil quality. So those came up, and by and large, on each of the categories, people in our group, there were 8 voting members, felt strongly that there were lots of co-benefits to be had from any of the measures.
That's great. Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, I'll mention one in our word cloud that appeared. I did want to mention that our group mentioned sort of motivation for continued change, and I thought that was an interesting thing to bring up in our word cloud, because once you see some of the benefits of these reduction activities, it does motivate folks to invest in more changes and more, and we'll see the ease with which some of these things can be implemented. All right, Maggie, I just spotted you, so I'm going to go to you next. If we can unmute you.
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
Great. So yeah, my group, looking at the co-benefits, health also was a big one, popped up as the top choice for a lot of the options. Local and state preparedness was also frequently up there for us. Looking at our word cloud, cleaner air was a big piece, and job creation were some of the big ones for our word cloud.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. Let's see, who we'll go to next. Kim.
Hi, yes, Breakout Group 8 was awesome, total rock stars. And we did not even have one single technical difficulty, I just have to say. The team was just on it. Really good comments, a lot of focus similarly on health benefits, but we talked quite a bit. There's a lot of comments around personal and local and state economic development. In our kind of word cloud. That was really what struck us was, kind of three key things: improved health around environmental quality, economic and job opportunities, and then really thinking about just all the alternatives that are available for, getting to that renewable fuels and low carbon liquid fuels. And we did have a mention of equity, which was important. Another really big piece that came up was just the reminder that the focus on fuel and roadway efficiency is really super, super important. And while zero emission vehicles are helpful in a good transition, we really do need to get to, not being in our cars so much and really thinking about land use planning and telecommuting and things of that sort. So, really great group.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kim. Let's see, I'm going to go down to Larissa next. Once we get you unmuted.
There we go. Hi, so our group was great, and it looks like there was pretty solid agreement among many of them around all the co-benefits. A lot of them got the 3 section 1, a lot of them were in agreement there. They had, let's see, yeah, many of them, it seems like they strongly agreed on a lot of those co-benefits. The only one that was fairly different was the waste diversion and reduction. It seemed like more people were pretty neutral on that. And around our word cloud, we had jobs, clean air, and health that really stood out for most people. And there was also a lot on agriculture, food, health. So that was really interesting pattern to see there. Yep, that's it for us.
Great. All right, who am I going to next? Karen.
All right, so our group really did their homework when we were asking about measures for largest GHG reduction impact. The group got the right answer each time. So looking at those zero emission vehicles and renewable energy and fuel and roadway efficiency was great. And then in terms of potential benefits, for across the board, whether it's a building electrification or fuel and roadway efficiency, even down to waste diversion and reduction, natural resource protection and health benefits were leading potential benefits there, with local or state economic developments catching up. So a lot of agreement across the group on potential benefits of each of these measures.
That's fantastic. All right, Anne.
Great. In breakout room 2, we had participation by those in Mentimeter. We also had a phone participant. So we had some offline dialogue as well from the actual activity. But some of the interesting things that came out both in the other benefits dialogue, we had folks bring up issues of coastal erosion, water quality, just general beautification of the environment, vistas, and less trash. Restoration, so some opportunities that were co-benefits that were not listed. But we also had in our phone conversation, making sure that the state, as they're making their decision, is looking at negative impacts or looking at costs, looking at some of the trade-offs that may came up a little bit in our first question when we were looking at cost effectiveness, but making sure to look at cost and externalities as well. And we have an offline follow-up there as well. So we had a great group and looking forward to the collective results.
That's great, and I like those couple of comments. We did have a couple questions and comments come up around sort of the boundaries, and obviously we referred folks to the technical report for sort of methods and boundaries, but how deeply, when you're thinking about industrial related emissions or fuel and roadway emissions, what are the life cycle things are we talking about as far back as where we're extracting materials, those kinds of questions. So very thoughtful group of folks. I think we have one more facilitator, last but not least, Brandy.
Hi, everybody. Our group was also really good. We had good participation, a little maybe on the quiet side. I was really surprised by how much agreement there was around some of the co-benefits. I mean, some of them we had kind of a lot of variability, but on others there was really some very strong agreement showing up. I think that when we talked about other benefits, our group had some of the same things we've already heard, but there were a few that popped out to me that I haven't heard people bring up. We had a few responses around reducing sea level rise. We had a few responses around more moderate weather or temperature reductions, and we had a few responses around future generations that came up in our group. Oh.
Sorry, folks, I accidentally remuted myself and couldn't unmute myself. Thank you, Brandy. Sorry for the delayed response there. That all sounds great. So the next thing we're going to do is poll you all again, and I believe Anne or Brandy or Teresa will pull up the next round of polling. So we asked you this in our breakout groups, but thinking about it one more time, based on everything that you've heard about today from the greenhouse gas reduction potential, the co-benefits, the cost effectiveness of this, as well as just sort of overall timescale of how quickly we need to reduce impacts, because I know there have been comments about how aggressively and quickly we need to move on certain reductions as well. What are the first actions that you think Delaware needs to take to minimize emissions? And I think we'll give it just another second here for folks to make their votes. And we'll go ahead and close this out and see what folks had to say. All right, Delaware, you have your answer. Renewable energy first. No, this is great. A strong showing for renewable energy, and I think that goes to that's, you know, because we see the tremendous amount of greenhouse gas reduction potential there, as well as the co-benefits associated with it, whether it be economic development, opportunities, job creation, et cetera. So really great to see that. Closely following, building energy efficiency, of course, and in zero emission vehicles also had a pretty good showing there as well. So we're not going to only do one of these, and these are also not the only strategies. So really, but really helpful to think about how we should be prioritizing these things moving forward. All right, the next one, do I have to click close, or are you going to open the next question? There we go. We have one more question. And you know, Susan talked a little bit about the context in which we're operating here, that we're trying to make significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century in order to avoid some of the worst consequences of climate change. And so we want to know from you, you know, Susan talked about the short-term target that Delaware has adopted, but should Delaware adopt a long-term greenhouse gas reduction target to align with some of the other countries and states and cities that have been adopting reduction targets? So we've got 5 different options here. So no, we don't need to worry about greenhouse gas emissions. No, Delaware is doing enough without setting any specific targets. Yes, Delaware should set a target of 80% emissions reductions by 2050 based on 2005 levels. Yes, Delaware should set a target of more than 80% emissions reductions. And then finally, yes, Delaware should set a target, but less than 80% reductions. I will say that the result here is not a commitment from the state for any of these, but really want to get your input on where they should be headed in considering these. We'll give it just a few more seconds here, and then I will let you guys go ahead and close this poll. We can see our results. All right. We've got some general consensus here for a mid-century target of at least 80% reduction. So 34%, just over a third of you thinking we should aim for 80% emission reduction by 2050. 54% saying that we should be even more aggressive than that. So looking at more than 80%, perhaps many of you thinking about carbon neutrality goals that we are seeing pop up in a number of states. So really great feedback and food for thought. And with that, I will hand it back over to Susan to close us out and offer any closing thoughts. I'm sure we have to just unmute Susan again.
Okay, I am now unmuted. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody who stuck with us through the exercises. I won't take too much longer to wind us up, but I do have some important information to share with you. So again, thank you for taking the time out. We know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate you being here to have this conversation with us today. And we don't want the conversation to end here. Our web portal will remain open for your input and ideas through Friday, October 16th. So I will say that date again, Friday, October 16th. We are looking for that feedback by that time, because then we're actually going to start drafting our plan, and we want to have your ideas in hand. We also have what's known as a MetroQuest survey available, where you can provide feedback on both emission reductions and resiliency in sort of an interactive way, if you would like to also fill that out. So, and then you can also send us an email or a letter on the portal with your comments, ideas, or suggestions. So some of you may have very specific things you want to highlight or reports you want to point us to, and that would be a good way to do that. And in fact, many of you have already done so. And also, this was the first online workshop that our team has put on, and we're really interested to know how the format worked for you, what you liked, what you didn't like, and how we can improve for next time. I'm certainly an in-person kind of person, and I really love engaging with you in a room. That wasn't possible here, so we're really trying to do the best we can. And we may want to do it more in the future, because it is quite convenient for people to get together this way. So our team is going to send a post-workshop survey to you next week that will focus just on the workshop format. So not the content, but just the format. Did it work for you? What did you like? What did you not like? We'd really appreciate it if you can make a special effort to give us that feedback so we can make improvements next time we do this. A workshop summary, including the results of all of our workshops, will be available this fall, right? And if you had fun with us today and can't get enough and want more, please register for the upcoming climate resiliency workshops. These are happening through October 1st. Each workshop will focus on a specific climate impact. So there's a sea level rise day, increasing temperature day, and a heavy precipitation and flooding day. You can participate in all, or just one or two. So more information about those is available online at declimateplan.org. And the dates and times are up there. So again, you do need to register the same way that you registered for this workshop, and I encourage you to do so. And that is all I have to say. It looks like we're actually going to wrap up right at 1 o'clock. Again, thank you. We're so glad to have you as a partner in our efforts to solve Delaware's climate change challenges. I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful lunch.